Hello everyone, and welcome back to my film analysis project for Liz and the Blue Bird. I'm Miles, and today I'll be attempting to go deep into the first scene of the film. Scene 1 sets up the fairy tale storytelling motif for the rest of the film. It also sets up the visual and musical contrast between the fairy tale world and the world of Mizore and Nozomi. Let's start with some numbers. Scene 1 begins with this shot, and ends on this shot. At least, visually it begins on shot 1. I'll address this in a moment. There are 21 shots total. This scene has a duration of about 1 minute and 26 seconds, and that makes the average shot length about 4 seconds. So before, I said that the film visually starts with shot 1, implying that the beginning of the film was something else. That implication is that the film actually begins with the main musical theme. I've transcribed the main theme here. It appears to be in D Mixolydian. In all honesty, I'm not well versed enough in music theory to really grapple with the significance of this choice. It's also the main musical theme of the film. I hope to revisit this idea in the future. One thing that I can say now though is that this piece is an idealized variation of what Mizore and Nozomi play in scene 3 during the title sequence, and is further utilized with Reina's and Kumiko's duet, and during Mizore's and Nozomi's The Things We Do for Love duet. In this way, the idea of disjoints is being set up to be further reinforced and emphasized. It's also revisited as the main musical motif during each of the fairy tale scenes, except for one, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Something else to note here is that the orchestration is very lush and full. This is an obvious way to contrast against the spaciousness and sparseness of the music in Mizore's and Nozomi's world, which we will hear next in scene 2. Also, notice how the oboe is much more in the front of this arrangement during this intro piece, which is called The Beginning of the Story, or Monogatari no Hajimari. This is possibly priming us to link Liz with Mizore on our own before it's done for us in scene 3, since Liz is the main focus here in this scene and the oboe is the highlighted instrument in this arrangement.
なんかちょっと私たちみたいだな。
This of course assumes that you have watched Hibike Euphonium and know that Mizore plays the oboe. Now let's look at the first 3 shots. Shot 1 begins with a rack in focus from an overexposed white. I could say that this effect evokes a sense of waking up, but that is a subjective interpretation rather than an objective observation. Shots 2 and 3 are still shots with some diegetic sounds of the wind, birds, and other lakeside noises. All 3 shots are establishing shots for this particular scene. More than establishing the location though, they also establish a setting. Taken together, these first 3 shots set up the idea that this story is a fairy tale without explicitly beginning this film with the phrase, "Once upon a time." Instead, they show us that phrase. And in doing so, the visual language is set up such that we can begin to view the fairy tale sections as if we are reading a storybook. Here's evidence for my claim. Firstly, you have the medium of the colors in the backgrounds. I'm not certain if the medium is gouache, or watercolor, or even a mix of both, but in any case, it's a striking choice. The palette of colors is also very vibrant, and these choices really help to suggest a fantastical setting. The imperfect filling of colors between objects, for example like here, very much help to emphasize that you are looking at a painting. And along this idea, they have even left the texture of the paper visible, further emphasizing this idea of a painting. In addition to the medium, The subjects in these first 3 shots are that of luscious beds of blooming flowers, fantastically beyond what you might find in reality. Starting in shot 5, how Liz is interacting with the animals further reinforces the idea that this is a fairy tale. We also have the rule of 3 present here, as shot 4 changes the time of day and location from the first 3 shots. While not exclusive to fairy tales, it is a trope that is oftentimes used in fairy tales. Compared to Mizore's and Nozomi's tale, this first scene is more like reading a fairy tale book, and indeed, in scene 3 we're even shown the book itself. In every shot of the fairy tale, the camera is planted solidly on either a stationary platform or on a smooth track, either on a crane or a dolly. In the fairy tale, the camera work seems to be designed to become invisible, which can be yet another point of evidence for us to be viewing this as reading a book. The visual language of the fairy tale scenes has the camera being more of a passive window into the story rather than having us be inside the story. Mizore's and Nozomi's tale contrasts against this as many shots are handheld, and we can see the actual camera at work rather than it being an invisible framing device that we're not meant to notice, further helping us feel like we're inside of their perspectives, and we're not just viewing the girl's story from outside. Also starting in this sequence, we see some very easy to follow visual storytelling. Between shots 4 and 5, we start behind Liz and the animals with a wide shot and go to a reversal medium shot in front of them. We start as an outside observer and move into a closer position with Liz, suggesting that she is the main character. Here between shots 5 and 6, we see the chipmunk move down from Liz's shoulders to her lap, and the shots change accordingly. In shots 8, 9, and 10, we have a very simple reaction sequence between the raccoon and Liz, which remains visually coherent despite moving between 3 shots. Shots 9, 10, and 11 have us moving from a third-person perspective looking at Liz to a point-of-view shot from Liz's sight, and back to a third-person perspective looking at Liz. There's no room to question if shot 10 was a point-of-view shot or not. We can see Liz's eyeline change in the same way that the camera tilts up. This is very clean, simple, and obvious cinematography at work. And that is the general feeling of the cinematography in the fairy tale scenes. This helps the unconventional shots in Mizore's and Nozomi's tale to have more impact. Shots 11 to 15 utilize a motif of setting up our first main character, Liz, against the second main character, the blue bird. This motif is having each character take up one half of the shot. Respectively, Liz is presented on the left, while the blue bird is presented on the right. The camera moving between medium and close-up shots helps to emphasize them as the main characters as well. It was also a very clever idea to have the blue bird presented to us on a tree stump, as if suggesting a pedestal of sorts, in addition to presenting the blue bird as the second main character. Indeed, Mizore certainly puts Nozomi in a pedestal throughout the film, which helps to explain their disjointed and imbalanced relationship. And even Nozomi puts Mizore on a pedestal after Mizore's heartfelt performance when the two of them are reconciling in the science room. Wrapping up the scene, the ending shots also foretell the ending of the fairy tale overall. The bluebird enters Liz's life for a fleeting moment before flying away, leaving behind a sense of wonder in Liz's life. Notice how the music is utilized to further the effect of a magical encounter. The crescendo reaches its peak right as the bird lands in Liz's hands and drops off sharply with a very open and quiet moment of just an idiophone playing as the bird flies away.
まるで空を映した湖のよう。
The final shot has the camera tilting down into a rich bed of flowers into an overexposure to all white. The music for this scene resolves as well, though not completely. It doesn't resolve in a normal sense. It resolves in the sense that the last chord settles some of the tension present in the second to last chord, but it's not a resolution to the entire piece, thus leaving the tension to remain leading into the rest of the film. This is the most that I can transcribe as far as the core of the chords go. I also want to mention one final aspect that this scene helps to set up and that scene 2 contrasts with. The pacing in this scene is pretty regular, with almost every shot adhering to the average of 4 seconds, plus or minus a second. In scene 2, this convention is broken a bit, with some shots being held for a very long time relative to the average, and other shots only captured briefly. This change in pacing further establishes an overall sense of disjointment, as well as differentiating the visual language between both stories. And that's a wrap on Scene 1. I hope you'll join me next time when I talk about Scene 2, where we will see how the setup of the contrasts in Scene 1 play out. I'll also discuss as much as I can about how the music plays an integral part in how the story of Mizore and Nozomi is set up and further told, amongst a few other topics. A quick shout out to my collaborator Paul Ocone, who helped create and edit the script. He has his own channel that I'll link to below. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, or at least entertaining. And if you are so inclined, I'd love to hear your thoughts and responses to this deep dive. One of my goals of this project is to further enrich everyone's appreciation of this film. Until next time, farewell.